Module 3 Results Family, Childhood, and Early Education. Lesson 3 Early Education. The objective: reflect on the people and events of Jose Rizal's early education at Biñan that significantly contributed to his life. Guide question: how did the people and events of Jose Rizal's early education at Biñan significantly contributed to his life? One Sunday afternoon in June 1869, Jose, after kissing the hands of his parents and a tearful parting from his sisters, left Calamba for Biñan. He was accompanied by Pasiano, who acted as his second father. The two brothers rode in a carromata, reaching their destination after 1.5 hours' drive. They proceeded to their aunt's house, where Jose was to lodge. It was almost night when they arrived, and the moon was about to rise. That same night, Jose, with his cousin Leandro, went sightseeing in the town. Instead of enjoying the sights, Jose became depressed because of homesickness. In the moonlight, he recounted, I remembered my hometown, my idolized mother, and my solicitous sisters. Ah, how sweet to me was Calamba, my own town, in spite of the fact that it was not as wealthy as Biñan. The next morning, Monday, Pasiano brought his younger brother to the school of Maestro Justiniano Aquino Cruz. The school was in the house of the teacher, which was a small nipa hut about 30 meters from the home of Jose's aunt. Pasiano knew the teacher quite well because he had been a pupil under him before. He introduced Jose to the teacher, after which he departed to return to Calamba. Immediately, Jose was assigned seat in the class. The teacher asked him, Do you know Spanish? A little, sir, replied the Calamba lad. Do you know Latin? A little, sir. The boys in the class, especially Pedro, the teacher's son, laughed at Jose's answers. The teacher sharply stopped all the noise and began the lessons of the day. Jose described his teacher in Biñan as follows. He was tall, thin, long-necked, with a sharp nose and a body slightly bent forward, and he used to wear a cinnamon shirt, woven by the skilled hands of the women of Batangas. He knew by heart the grammars by Nebrija and Gainza. Add to this his severity that in my judgment was exaggerated, and you have a picture, perhaps vague, that I have made of him, but I remember only this. In the afternoon of his first day in school, when the teacher was having his siesta, Jose met the bully Pedro. He was angry at this bully for making fun of him during his conversation with the teacher in the morning. Jose challenged Pedro to a fight. The latter readily accepted, thinking that he could easily beat the Calamba boy, who was smaller and younger. The two boys wrestled furiously in the classroom, much to the glee of their classmates. Jose, having learned the art of wrestling from his athletic Tio Manuel, defeated the bigger boy. For this feat, he became popular among his classmates. After the class in the afternoon, a classmate named Andres Salandanan challenged him to an arm wrestling match. They went to a sidewalk of a house and wrestled with their arms. Jose, having the weaker arm, lost and nearly cracked his head on the sidewalk. In succeeding days, he had other fights with the boys of Biñan. He was not quarrelsome by nature, but he never ran from a fight. Near the school was the house of an old painter called Juancho, who was the father-in-law of the school teacher. Jose, lured by his love for painting, spent many leisure hours at the painter's studio. Old Juancho freely gave him lessons in drawing and painting. He was impressed by the artistic talent of the Calamba lad. Jose and his classmate Jose Guevara, who also loved painting, became apprentices of the old painter. They improved their art so that in due time they became the favorite painters of the class. Jose led a methodical life in Biñan, almost Spartan in simplicity. Such a life contributed much to his future development. It strengthened his body and soul. Speaking of his daily life in Biñan, he recorded in his memoir, "Here was my life. I heard the 4 o'clock mass, if there was any, or I studied my lesson at that hour, and I went to mass afterwards. I returned home and I went to the orchard to look for a mabolo to eat. Then I took breakfast, which consisted generally of a dish of rice and 2 dried small fish. And I went to class, from which I came out at 10 o'clock. I went home at once. If there was some dish, Leandro and I took some of it to the house of his children, which I never did at home, nor would I ever do it. And I returned without saying a word. I ate with them, and afterwards I studied. I went to school at 2 and came out at 5. I played a short while with some nice cousins, and I returned home. I studied my lesson. I drew a little, and afterwards I took my supper, consisting of 1 or 2 dishes of rice with an ayungin. We prayed, and if there was a moon, my nieces invited me to play in the street together with others. Thank God that I never got sick away from my parents." In academic studies, Jose beat all Biñan boys. He surpassed them all in Spanish, Latin, and other subjects. Some of his older classmates were jealous of his intellectual superiority. They wickedly squealed to the teacher whenever Jose had a fight outside the school, and even told lies to discredit him before the teacher's eyes. Consequently, the teacher had to punish Jose. The result said that, in spite of the reputation I had of being a good boy, the day was unusual when I was not laid out on a bench and given 5 or 6 blows. Before the Christmas season in 1870, Jose received a letter from his sister Saturnina, informing him of the arrival of the steamer Talim, which would take him from Biñan to Calamba. Upon reading the letter, he had a premonition that he would not return to Biñan, so that he became sad. He prayed in the town church, collected pebbles in the river for souvenirs, and regretfully bade farewell to his teacher and classmates. He left Biñan on Saturday afternoon, December 17, 1870. After 1 year and a half of his schooling in that town, he was thrilled to take passage on the steamer Talim, for it was the first time he ever rode a steamer. On board was a Frenchman named Arturo Camps, a friend of his father who took care of him. On the night of January 20, 1872, about 200 Filipino soldiers and workmen of the Cavite Arsenal under the leadership of La Madrid, Filipino sergeant rose in violent mutiny because of the abolition of their usual privileges, including exemption from tribute and polo, by the reactionary Governor Rafael de Izquierdo. Unfortunately, this Cavite mutiny was suppressed 2 days later by troop reinforcements from Manila. The Spanish authorities, in order to liquidate Father Mariano Gomez, Father Jose Burgos, and Jacinto Zamora, leaders of the secular movement to Philippinize the Philippine parishes, and their supporters, Jose Maria Basa, attorneys Joaquin Pardo de Tevera, and Antonio Maria Regidor, etc., magnified the failed mutiny into a revolt for Philippine independence. Accordingly, Gomburza, Gomez, Burgos, and Zamora, despite the Archbishop's plea for clemency because of their innocence, were executed at sunrise, February 17, 1872, by order on Governor General Izquierdo. Their martyrdom was deeply mourned by the Rizal family and many other patriotic families in the Philippines. Pasiano, enraged by the execution of Burgos, his beloved friend, teacher, and housemate, quit his studies at the College of San Jose and returned to Calamba, where he told the heroic story of Burgos to his younger brother, Jose. who was then nearly 11 years old. The martyrdom of Burza in 1872 truly inspired Rizal to fight the evils of Spanish tyranny and redeem his oppressed people. 17 years later, in his letter written in Paris, April 18, 1889, to Mariano Ponce, he said, "Without 1872, there would not be now either a Plaridel or Haina or Sangsiangco, nor would there exist brave and generous Filipino colonies in Europe. Without 1872, Rizal would be a Jesuit now, and instead of writing Noli Me Tangere, would have written the opposite. At the sight of those injustices and cruelties, while still a child, my imagination was awakened and I swore to devote myself to avenge one day so many victims, and with this idea in mind I have been studying, and this can be read in all my works and writings. God will someday give me an opportunity to carry out my promise." And later in 1891 he dedicated his second novel, El Filibusterismo, to Gomburza. Before June of 1872, tragedy struck the Rizal family. Doña Teodora was suddenly arrested on a malicious charge that she and her brother, Jose Alberto, tried to poison the latter's perfidious wife. Jose Alberto, a rich Biñan ilustrado, had just returned from a business trip in Europe. During his absence, his wife abandoned their home and children. When he arrived in Biñan, he found her living with another man. Infuriated by her infidelity, he planned to divorce her. Doña Teodora, to avert family scandal, persuaded him to forgive his wife. The family trouble was amicably settled, and Jose Alberto lived again with his wife. However, the evil wife, with the connivance of the Spanish lieutenant of the Guardia Civil, filed a case in court accusing her husband and Doña Teodora of attempting to poison her. This lieutenant happened to have an axe to grind against the Rizal family because at one time Don Francisco, Rizal's father, refused to give him fodder for his horse. Taking the opportunity to avenge himself, he arrested Doña Teodora with the help of Calambas Gobernadorcillo Antonio Vivencio del Rosario, a menial of the friars. These two ungrateful men had been frequent guests at the Rizal home. After arresting Doña Teodora, the sadistic Spanish lieutenant forced her to walk from Calamba to Santa Cruz, capital of Laguna province, a distance of 50 kilometers. Upon arrival in Santa Cruz, she was incarcerated at the provincial prison, where she languished for 2 years and a half until the Manila Royal Audiencia, or the Supreme Court, acquitted her of the alleged crime. Recounting these incidents of his mother's imprisonment, Rizal said in his student memoir, "Our mother was unjustly snatched away from us, and by whom? By some men who had been our friends and whom we treated as honored guests. We learned later that our mother got sick, far from us and at an advanced age. My mother was defended by Francisco de Marcaida and Manuel Marzan, the most famous lawyers of Manila. She finally succeeded to be acquitted and vindicated in the eyes of her judges, accusers, and even her enemies, but after how long? After 2.5 years. References: